Think about the last conversation you had. Maybe it was just figuring out dinner or a quick chat with a coworker. Seems pretty simple, right? But what if I told you that in those few minutes, you were actually building worlds, negotiating who you are, and pulling off these complex social moves, all with your words? Well, today, we're going to pull back that curtain and explore the absolutely fascinating field of discourse analysis. Okay, so to get our heads around this, let's zoom in on a case study. And hey, don't worry about all the text on the screen for a second. Here's all you need to know. We're basically eavesdropping on a student, Susan, meeting her academic advisor, Neil. She's trying to figure out the best major for med school. I mean, this is a conversation that happens on college campuses everywhere, every single day.
But is it really that simple? Come on, what are Susan and Neil really doing with their language here? Are they just swapping information? Or is there something way more subtle, something much more powerful going on underneath? That's the puzzle we're going to try and crack today.
Now, to solve this puzzle, you need the right set of tools. And for us, that tool is discourse analysis. Seriously, forget your old grammar textbooks. This is all about studying language as a living, breathing thing, a tool we use to build our identities, to make our relationships, and to literally shape the world around us. Think of it as our special magnifying glass for seeing the hidden blueprint of this conversation.
All right, let's put on our analyst hats and dive in. Section 1. We're decoding the transcript. So the very first thing any discourse analyst does is look at the context. And why is that? Well, it's because words are kind of like chameleons. They completely change their meaning depending on where they are. I mean, think about it. The phrase, "I'm not sure," is totally casual when you're picking a restaurant with a friend, but when a surgeon says it in the middle of an operation, whoa, suddenly those same three words have this immense weight. Context is everything.
And a really handy way to break this down is something called the speaking model. So let's just walk through it real quick. The setting? It's a university office. The participants? A student and an advisor. And right away, that tells you there's a bit of a power dynamic, yeah? The end goal is for Susan to get advice. And the act sequence, well, it's a formal meeting, not just some casual chat. Just by laying out these four simple things, we already get so much about the unwritten rules of this entire conversation.
Okay, now let's get to the words themselves. This, right here, is where it gets really, really cool. A core idea in discourse analysis is that language isn't just for describing stuff, it's for doing stuff. When you say, "I promise," you're not just talking about a promise. You are actually performing the act of promising. You're locking yourself into a future action. We call these speech acts, and believe me, our conversations are absolutely jam-packed with them. All right, so let's look at a specific moment in the transcript. See, Susan doesn't just ask, "Hey, should I be a math major?" No, instead, she tells a story. She says something like, "Helen told me that because medical schools, they prefer math major people." She's just reporting what someone else said.
So what's the action here? I mean, literally, she's just reporting. But what is she really doing? She's making an indirect request. And this is it's a brilliant move. Instead of putting Neil, who's the expert here, on the spot with a direct question, she just lays out this piece of info and invites him to react. She's pretty much saying, "Hey, here's what I heard. What do you think? Is that right?" It's a masterful way to ask for advice without sounding too pushy.
Okay, and here's another amazing thing our brains do completely on autopilot. Think about it. When you're telling a story about your friend, let's call him Bob, you don't keep saying, "Bob did this and then Bob did that." No, you switch to he. You create these little linguistic shortcuts. This is called referentiality, and it's basically the invisible thread that stitches all our sentences together so they make sense. So let's jump back to our transcript. In line 20, Susan drops a new name into the mix, Helen. Right at that moment, a new character has just walked onto the stage of this conversation, and now both speakers have this person, Helen, in their shared mental workspace. And then, watch what happens. In the very next few lines, both Susan and Neil start using her and she. They don't have to say Helen ever again. It's totally effortless. Their brains just automatically link she all the way back to the Helen from a few seconds ago. This is that linguistic glue that stops our conversations from just being a random jumble of words. It's what gives it flow. Okay, so we've been looking at all the tiny little gears and circuits of the conversation, right? So for section 2, let's zoom out. Let's see how all these small moves come together to build entire social worlds. Now check out this tiny, almost unnoticeable little moment. Neil asks if she's a math major. And she starts to say, "I am a math," but then she stops and corrects herself. I transferred as a math major. Now you might just hear a simple correction, but a discourse analyst hears something profound.
She is actively, in real time, negotiating her own identity. She shifts from a statement of what she is, I am, to a story about what she did, I transferred. She's literally constructing who she is for her advisor in that very moment.
And this kind of stuff is happening constantly. Through this back and forth, Susan and Neil are building their roles as student and expert advisor. They're defining the task right in front of them as choosing a major. Susan shows her uncertainty by bringing up Helen's advice, while Neil shows his authority by giving his own opinion. All of this is done through these careful and, often totally unconscious word choices.
So here it is, the big takeaway. Language. It isn't just a mirror that reflects the world as it already is. No, it's the toolkit. It is the hammer and nails we use to actually build our social reality, piece by piece, conversation by conversation. Our lives aren't just reflected in our words, they are literally made of them. Which brings us to our final section, and really the big question. Why does any of this even matter? What's at the heart of all this, really?
Well, as two researchers, Ox and Schiffelin, put it just beautifully, this kind of analysis reminds us that language has a heart. It shows us that when you look really, really closely at the details, the pauses, the self-corrections, those clever indirect requests, you start to see that language isn't some cold, abstract machine, no way. It is a profoundly human thing, just pulsing with our real intentions, our hidden feelings, and our deepest purposes.
So the next time you find yourself in what seems like a simple chat, I want you to just listen. But listen with new ears. What roles are being built? What subtle actions are being performed? What kind of world is being created? Right there, between you and the other person. Really, what will you hear in your next conversation?